I actually study mind-body unity. And I've been doing this for 40 some odd years. The world has come now to see mind-body connection, but that doesn't get us where we want to go. The problem is if you have a mind and a body as separate, how do you get the mind to talk to the body? How do you go from something fuzzy to something material? And so when I had thought about that years and years ago, it occurred to me, mind, body, these are just words. Let's put the mind and body back together. And then wherever you put the mind, you're necessarily putting the body. And in my new book, The Mindful Body, Thinking Our Way to Chronic Health, I outline, and maybe we can go over some of them now, some of these studies that suggest that this is a much more effective way of viewing the human being. When you have the mind and body as a single unit, that means our thoughts are far more important to our health and well-being than most people realize. And so essentially, that there's nothing really except ourselves that stands between our happiness, our effectiveness, and our health. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't care if my name is attached to it, but it would be, for so many decades, I've been trying to teach people about this way of being mindful that doesn't require meditation. That is a very simple way of being in the world with the results that's extraordinary. And I've been very lucky. I've been a happy person throughout my life. And I've spent so much time, study after study, book after book, trying to share it with people. And so it'd be very nice to have the effect of creating the kind of world that is in some sense within reach, where all of us can experience the outcomes that we want. Right now, the world has told us some of us are wonderful, some of us are average, some of us are not very good. And that's what I'm trying to argue against, that essentially, we have a vertical life where, people like me sit somewhere near the top and so on. And it seems to me somewhat silly. And I want to make it horizontal. And horizontal means that everybody is equally valuable. Everybody is equally able to achieve the things in life that we actually want. Yeah, you don't overthink if you're in the present. If you're in the present, you're in the present. When you're overthinking, you're in the future, all the ways something might be, or you're in the past, all the different ways something might have been. It's interesting, it's a very nice instruction to people to be in the present. The problem is that when you're not in the present, you're not there to know you're not there. So it's sort of an empty instruction. And my work is all about how to be there, which amounts to the very, very simple process of noticing. And when you notice new things about the things you thought you knew, you come to see, gee, you didn't know them at all. And then your attention naturally goes to them. So for instance, if you thought you knew what I was going to say next, why would you listen to me? So it's recognizing that in some sense, everything is new. Now, there are two ways to become mindful, top down and bottom up. So the bottom up is what I already explained. Walk outside, you open your door, you've done that every day for however long you've lived in that place, and notice three new things. Notice three new things about the person you might live with, your closest friend, three new things about work, whatever it is. With all of this active noticing, you walk away saying, gee, I didn't know it as well as I thought I did. And then your attention naturally goes to it. But the other way, which if you can accomplish this is easier, harder to get there, but once you get there, easier to enact, is top down. Recognize the power of uncertainty. What people don't understand is that everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. And so if you recognize you don't know, I don't know, nobody really knows, then you naturally tune in. If you were going to visit me right now, I'm at my house in Provincetown on the Cape. It's lovely here. You've never been here. You would walk in and you wouldn't have to practice anything. Everything would be new. You'd say, oh, what books is she reading? What is that strange thing over there? Oh, did she do that painting? And what people don't understand is that when they're happy, it's because they're present. You can't be happy in the past. Robots aren't happy. And when we're mindless, we're no different from being robots. Right. So this is something that's easy, that as you're noticing new things, the neurons are firing, and 45 years of research has shown us that it's literally and figuratively enlivening. So it's easy, it feels good, and the ramifications are enormous. And it's the only way to be happy. Yes, yes. You can't do it by rote, because then you're just being mindless. So people would ask me many years ago, they started to say, what's the simplest way to be mindful? I said, okay, so if you always put your right shoe on first, put your left shoe on first. But if you always do, you put your left shoe on first, you stop paying attention to it, and that too becomes mindless. So it's recognizing that even if you're doing the exact same thing you've done 1,000 times, there are things around you that are different. You're different. If you meet someone for the second time, it's not the same as meeting them for the first time or the 10th time, and so on. So people would grow enormously by accepting uncertainty, but they're afraid to. What happens is, when you don't know, most people, when somebody doesn't know, they feel they're going to be found out. Somebody's going to think they're stupid. And so we pretend, or we avoid the situation. So people make a personal attribution for not knowing, which is, I don't know, but you may know. Therefore, I'm going to feel bad, hide, or what have you. What we have to do is change that and make a universal attribution for uncertainty. I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows. And and not knowing is good. Let me give you an example. I don't know if it speaks well here, but it's fun. You're a little kid, at least in the United States, and you go on an elevator and you try to press that button and you can't reach it. And a parent, an adult, picks you up and you press the button. It's very exciting. And, next time you're in an elevator, you try and you're getting a little closer, but you still can't reach them. They pick you up. Then eventually, now, my goodness, you're big enough, you press that button yourself. Well, that's the end, right? When was the last time you were excited about pressing an elevator button? Mm-hmm. So we don't want all the certainty of the success that we think we do. It's the mastering that's fun, not having mastered. Oh, for sure. We have some really exciting but bizarre findings that mindfulness is contagious. And even if I don't tell, we don't discuss the weird part of these studies, in a very simple way, we have lots of research showing that people find people who are mindful charismatic, authentic, trustworthy. And so you can imagine that the more people that are mindful, the more people feel connected, feel whole, feel satisfied. And there's a lot of research, not from our lab, but in the field at large, about the importance of social support. And it's much easier to reach out to somebody when you don't think they're going to snap your head off or feel superior to you or what have you. Yes, no, this is what my aim would be, is to create the mindful society. And we don't have to get everybody, because again, it's contagious. So if we just get enough people in a company, in a school, in a family, it will spread. And the spreading means that everybody's life would be better. Right now, all of the disagreements, all of the harshness people experience is a function of their mindlessness. When you're mindful, you're aware that every situation can be understood in multiple ways. You're aware that outcomes are in our heads. They're not in events. Events aren't good, bad. People aren't, awful, wonderful. But our minds make them so. And so when you realize that anything you're experiencing, you can experience in a different way, and life just changes and becomes easier. Right now, if you think that things are either good or bad, you kill yourself to get the good things, you run like hell to get away from the bad things. When you realize they're just things, then you can stand still and whatever happens, happens. I'll tell you a funny story. I was doing a podcast the other day, and I was saying something similar to what I've just said now. And then I said, okay, so let's say that the internet goes out right now. Well, so what? But many young people, oh my goodness, as if something big happened. And I said, if the internet went out right now, so I'd go and I'd have breakfast. And then the funniest thing happened. The internet went out. And I did indeed. It was lunchtime, so not breakfast. Now it'd be breakfast. But I went and had lunch. As you get older, you see that most of these things we worry about just don't matter. I do this fun thing in my one of my classes, and I tell the students, you can't come to class next week unless you're wearing two different shoes. Okay. And they're scared, right? And the bold students wear a white and a black shoe, something you can really notice. The others wear shoes that you have to look very close. And did anybody notice? And did anybody who noticed ignore you, think less of you? The people that who care about you are not going to stop caring. They're going to know you typically wear the same shoe. The people you don't know, so why do you care? It's very freeing because so many of us are trapped by all of these views of other people disparaging us. And when you recognize also that there's nothing a person can do that can't be understood in a negative way. Nothing. So, for example, if you might not like me because I'm gullible, which I am. I mark the edge of the gullible continuum. But you may really like me because I'm trusting. Well, gullible and trusting are the same thing. I don't like you because you're so inconsistent. I love you because you're so flexible. All right. And we can't control the way people see our behavior. When we recognize that, all we can be is just kind and aware that what we're doing makes sense, or else we ourselves wouldn't do it. And then life just changes. And that one thing that I just said now, it's interesting. I have so many profound findings in these studies. It's a lot of decades I've been doing this. We have many studies where we make people more mindful and they live longer. We have new studies where we teach people this attention to symptom variability treatment and chronic illness dissipates. Nevertheless, in the face of all these exciting findings, but one thing that mattered most to me that I came to after all these years was the simple understanding that people's behavior makes sense from their perspective, or else they wouldn't do it. And that means every time you're seeing somebody in a negative light, what you're doing is being mindless. You weren't intending to be inconsistent, for instance. Your intention, if anything, was to be flexible. My intention wasn't to be gullible. It was to be trusting. And, you just think about that all the people that you're rejecting because of how they are, if you just understood how they were from their perspective, your feelings about them would probably change. And we have, evidence with in intimate relationships, for instance, where, in a simple way, if you know that every single negative behavior has a positive alternative, and that you can choose which way to see the person, why would you choose to see the person in this negative light and destroy your relationship? The problem is that people don't realize that whatever they're seeing can be seen in a different way. And that's what being mindful shows you. No, I don't think so. I mean, there may be some strange event that doesn't come to my mind, but no, I think it's always better to be either mindful or potentially mindful. Now, when you're mindless, you think you know. And when you think you know, you're no longer paying the attention. So in my argument that being mindful is always good, imagine that you're in a playground with a little child, a 3-year-old. And somebody might say, and let's say this 3-year-old wanders into the street. You might ask, well, wouldn't it be better, to just mindlessly grab the child to save them from oncoming cars? And I say no. Even first of all, if you were mindful, the child wouldn't have ended up in the street in the first place. You would have been aware of where the child was. Second, that before you pull the child out of the harm's way, you need to pay some attention to whether the car is likely to swerve to the right or the left, so you know in which direction to rescue the child. It's never an advantage to not be there. And when you're mindless, you're no different from a robot. When you're mindless, you have no choices. When you're mindless, you have no positive emotions. When you're mindless, you can't make plans. I don't see why it would be an advantage. That doesn't mean you couldn't be mindful of everything simultaneously. But you don't want to think you know anything so well that it doesn't require you paying any attention to it. An example, let's say you bought the Mercedes fire alarms. So you just spent a fortune. Your friends think you're crazy. Who would spend all that money on fire alarms? But you bought them. Okay. And now imagine that there's an odor, potentially smoke in the house. Well, for the person who now thinks that the fire alarm is so good, you don't have to worry about anything, you're not going to pick up that cue. And that's essentially what happens when we're mindless. We think we know. We're holding everything still, forgetting that everything is changing, that nothing is perfect. And beyond that, to me, the simplest thing is that you're not really alive when you're mindless. So why would anyone choose that? The bottom line is, I talk about decision making, and I say that we've got decision making all wrong. First of all, the reason you make a decision is to take an action. Once you take that action, there's no way to assess what alternative decisions, your alternative choices would have led to. But now, if you're supposed to do a cost benefit analysis, and then you add them up, and if the costs are greater, you go to the one where the benefits are greater, and so on. It doesn't make sense because every cost is a benefit, every benefit is a cost. So if I said to you, do you want to meet my friend John? John is very spontaneous. Yeah, let me meet him. Do you want to meet my friend John? John is very impulsive. No, I don't want to meet him. But spontaneous and impulsive are the same thing. So you can add costs and benefits. If every cost is a benefit, if you're mindful, and every benefit is a cost, it's going to add up to zero. All right. Now, you make decisions based on predictions, right? That, should I have this for dinner or that for dinner? The only way you can even begin to make that choice is if you've had this in the past and that. However, your body is not the same body anymore. There's nothing that is exactly the same as you last time you tasted this or that. So it's foolish to think you're going to know. Let me see if I can come up with better examples. Anyway, decision-making relies on predictions, and predictability is an illusion. This is complicated because people think they can predict. You can predict for large groups. So if I were going to start a car and in a used car lot versus start a random car in a Mercedes car lot, and you were going to bet on it, people would bet that the car in the Mercedes parking lot is more likely to start. But if you only had one instance, Mercedes on occasion, rarer than other cars, has a lemon. Would you bet your whole life savings that this car was going to start? Or let's say, I don't know who the greatest basketball player is now, but now if we were each shooting 100 baskets, yeah, he's probably going to win. But if we're shooting one basket, I, on more than a rare occasion, make the basket. He, on a rare occasion, misses the shot, right? I could win when it's just one basket. It's also the case that he may say to himself, let the old woman win. What do you care? Or he could have had a fight with a spouse. He could just not care. He didn't have his morning coffee, who knows what. So for a single instance, we can't know. And our lives consist of these single instances. So prediction is an illusion. Decision-making relies on predictions. Okay, so you make a decision to take action. You take an action. You can't know if the other action would have been better, worse, or indifferent. You can't do a cost-benefit analysis because every cost is a benefit. Every benefit is a cost. It's going to add up to zero. Anyway, I go through all of this very clearly in my book, The Mindful Body, but it leads me to a very funny conclusion, which is rather than waste your time trying to make the right decision, simply make the decision right. You can randomly decide what to do because you can't know that anything else would have been better. And then you make it work. So I did this with my graduate students and also in an undergraduate class. And I say, spend the week, don't make any decision. Flip a coin, use some simple idea that the first alternative that occurs to you, whatever it is, but do not make a decision for the whole week. So they would spend the week like this. They'd come back. So how was it? And it was stress-free. And, but this only works if, regret, that a lot of people experience regret because they think they've made the wrong decision. And regret suggests implicitly that some other decision would have been better. It might have been worse, might have been better. But it is neither good, bad, or indifferent, independent of the way you experience it. So if you know why you're doing what you're doing, you're never going to regret not doing something else. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, as soon as somebody tells you, oh, you missed this wonderful opportunity, then you're going to feel bad. So regret is mindless. And because of these regrets, people think they could be better decision makers. The quality of the decision making really is your ability to find the advantage to the option you selected. Yeah, well, of course, there was that award. Why didn't they give it to me? I mean, periodically, I'm as silly as everybody else. But then when you look more closely at it and you say, who are the people who made the decision? Other people might have made a different decision. That if you enjoy what you're doing, you're never going to regret not doing something else. And so when I teach my students, and this may be a bit anarchistic in some way, but you can do it their way, whoever they are. You can do it your way. You can win, you can lose. To me, the worst case scenario is giving up what matters to me, doing it their way, and also not succeeding. So as long as you're actively, mindfully doing what you're doing, you're having a good time while you're doing it. And it's nice when people recognize, but they're not always going to. So be it, but at least you've enjoyed and given it your honest effort. Well, it's interesting, that I was very, very fortunate. My parents were so loving and nurturing that, I've been positive throughout my life, and the most frustrating thing for me is to try to get other people, no, you can look at it this other way. So I don't experience very much stress. That when something happens, immediately I say, the advantages to whatever the other alternative is that I'm sitting with at the moment. But of course, you can't be as old as I am without having had different things happen to you. And, so my mother died when she was young, 57. So I was young. And that was hard. But then I realized that you only know people through your thoughts. And that for the rest of my life, and this has been true, I have the image of a very vital, beautiful woman without having to have gone through what seems very hard for lots of people when they get old. I had a major fire that destroyed 80% of what I owned. And because of the fire, I had to go to a hotel to live for a while. This was around Christmas Eve. And I left the hotel Christmas Eve to have dinner with friends. I came back to the hotel, and the room was full of gifts, not from the owners of the hotel, not from the management, but the so-called little people, the people who park my car, the chambermaids, the waiters. It took me, I can't tell you, it took me years to be able to tell that story without it bringing tears to my eyes. So here's this terrible thing that happened. Nevertheless, I don't miss any of the things that were burned in the fire. And every Christmas, I'm reminded of the goodness of so many people out there. So things happen, and then you deal with the things that happen. And if you stay in the place of, oh my God, this is awful, you're going to feel awful. If you find what is actually good about it, that softens that blow. But for day-to-day things, no, I don't experience a whole lot of stress, which, I think for my spouse can be irritating because I'm always happy. When I grew up, many kids are told by their parents, cheer up. My parents told me, cheer down. So what can I say? Okay, well, as far as aging goes, this I've devoted decades of my career to look at growth in late adulthood. And I think the problem with a lot of people is that you're brought up in a world that just sees aging as a series of losses. You get weaker and weaker. And while that's true in some ways, there are also many things that change in a very positive direction. I don't know, I might have been, 20 years old, and let's say I spilled spaghetti sauce. I'm wearing a white shirt, not black. I spilled spaghetti sauce. Oh my God. I would hide it, as if somebody saw that, then they'd lose respect for all sorts of silly things, and at this point, okay, so people who know me know I don't typically walk around with dirt on me, people who don't know me, who cares? Life just becomes it just becomes easier in so many ways. There is a great wisdom in getting older. And I think that it's also the case that you don't have to follow the typical losses that people talk about. I'm 78 years old. My vision is 2020. I'm 78 years old. I'm an active tennis player, not a great tennis player, but I get out on the court. I'm very intermediate. I think that if there's something that you want to do at any age, you should try to do it. And again, as with that elevator example I gave you, you really don't want complete success. I mean, if I were an ace tennis player, where every time I served the ball, I got it in the court, and it was an ace. Who would I play with? That it's lonely at the top, people say. I think that there's nothing that you can't do. There's nothing that is so age determined. Certainly, when you're younger, you're more flexible physically. And so it might take a little longer, but so what? You know, so no, I don't think that age should stop us, and it does stop too many people. And we have so many results. The counterclockwise study, which was, do you want me to talk about that one? Like,
Yes,
this
please.
was the first test of mind body unity, where we did this decades ago. We took a retreat and retrofitted it to 20 years earlier. Then we had elderly men live there as if they were their younger selves. So they would be speaking about past events as if they were just unfolding, for example. All right. Um, they lived there for a little less than a week. The results were their hearing improved, their vision improved, their strength, their memory, and they looked noticeably younger. So, with that in mind, I don't know that anybody can be sure. Let's keep saying this, uncertainty is the rule, but they can't achieve whatever they want to achieve. And it's the process of trying to achieve it that is life sustaining, not having achieved it. I have lots of awards that I've won in okay, so that's the past. That's not going to make me happy now unless I'm currently engaged in mindful creativity. Okay, well, that takes us back to decision making. You have to know that you can't know in advance how any of these paths will turn out to select the best path. And again, you can almost randomly choose among those options. I mean, there's some reason that they've occurred to you as options in the first place, and then you just make them work. It may sound simple-minded, but it's really simple instead. Life only consists of moments. And if you make the moment matter, then it all matters. And you can't make it matter more than it matters. Do you understand what I'm saying? That, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it matters how you're doing it. And so people should wake up and be present. And to be present, you just have to actively notice. It's interesting. I just wrote a children's book and questioning how to be happy. And it's not a mystery. People think that if they had status, power, a great deal of money, then they'd be happy. I know a lot of people with status, power, and a great deal of money, and they're miserable. That's not what makes you happy. But they think it makes them happy because it will make them happy because other people will then respect you. Now, why do you want other people to respect you? Because then you'll respect yourself. But there's a much easier way to get to that place, which I've already said, is if you recognize that everything that you do makes sense or else you wouldn't have done it. Even if the outcome turns out to be different than you might have imagined. And so we can respect our choices, respect ourselves, and then the path will just open up for us. But there isn't a single path for any of us. And I think that's what gets, people think you have to find the love of your life, the job, the only job that'll make you happy. Jobs and people don't make you happy. What makes us happy is the way we engage our jobs and other people. And simply noticing, simply being, which puts you in the present, makes you aware of possibilities, is the answer for a long and happy life.